We all hear that AI is a tool to make learning easier, faster, better. But what if that's not the whole story? What if, instead of just helping us learn, it's actually changing the very system our brain uses to learn in the first place? Today, we're going to break that system down. This quote right here, it just nails the central problem. When you use an AI to get an answer, you aren't actually building your own knowledge. You're just borrowing it. You get the thing you want, the essay, the code, the solution, but you completely skip the mental workout that's required to build that capability for yourself. All right, so before we can really dig into how AI messes with the system, we first have to understand how the system is supposed to work. What does genuine, honest-to-goodness learning actually look like under the hood? This is probably the most important rule of all. Your brain is not a hard drive. You can't just download information into it and expect it to stick. See, learning isn't passive consumption. It's an active, biological process, a system with a very specific set of rules. And this is that system. This is the learning loop. It all starts with input, right? Some new piece of information. But then comes the most important part, cognitive processing. This is the struggle, the effort. This is where your brain has to work, make connections, and, even make mistakes. That struggle leads to feedback, where you figure out what you got wrong and why. And it's only after that whole cycle that you get a real output, durable, stable understanding that you actually owned. Okay, so we have the blueprint for a working system. Now let's see what happens when we inject AI into it. And we're not talking about a helpful little tool on the side. We're talking about a variable that fundamentally changes the entire architecture. And here it is, the disruption in plain sight. On the left, you've got that healthy learning loop we just talked about. But on the right, well, the AI path creates a direct shortcut from input straight to the answer. The entire engine of learning, that whole cognitive processing and feedback stage, it just gets completely bypassed. The system collapses. So what do we actually lose when we take that shortcut? Well, we lose effortful retrieval, which is just the act of pulling information from your own memory. We lose error generation, the brain's alarm bell that it needs to pay attention and learn something. And most importantly, we lose the cognitive struggle itself. This isn't optimizing the process, it's ripping out the engine. So the loop has collapsed. What does that actually mean for our brains? To really get the impact, we have to look at something we've all been trained our whole lives to avoid: difficulty. There's this incredible concept from cognitive science called desirable difficulty. And what the research shows again and again is that our brains form stronger, more durable neural pathways when they're forced to overcome a manageable amount of effort. So the key takeaway here is that struggle isn't a barrier to learning, it is the biological mechanism of learning itself. Now, this habit of bypassing effort creates a really crucial shift in how we think. It moves us away from recall and towards recognition. Think about it. Recall's hard. It's generating an answer from your own memory, from scratch. Recognition is easy. It's just identifying the right answer when you see it. By constantly showing us the answer, AI traps us in this low-value state of perpetual recognition, and we never have to do the hard, valuable work of recall. And this all leads to a huge paradox. I mean, if the learning system is actually being broken, why does using AI so often feel like it's working so well? Let's deconstruct that illusion. So why does it feel like we're learning? Well, it all comes down to a sneaky phenomenon called cognitive fluency. The answers AI gives us are clear, perfectly structured, and just super easy to process. And our brain makes a critical error. It mistakes that ease of processing for our own mastery of the material. This fluency thing traps us in a really dangerous cycle. First, you read the AI's perfect answer. Second, because it was so easy to understand, you feel confident. You think, yep, that makes sense, I totally get it. But then, step 3, later on, when you're asked to recall that information on your own, you can't. The knowledge was never actually encoded. And that failure just sends you right back to the AI, reinforcing a dependency that feels productive but builds zero actual skill. This really gets at the vital distinction here. AI is fantastic at giving you information, which is external, something you recognize, and pretty temporary. But true learning builds understanding. That's internal. It has to be generated through your own effort, and it's durable. AI can give you all the information in the world, but it simply cannot do the internal work of building understanding for you. So we know this broken loop is happening in the moment. But what happens when we run this flawed system over and over? Not just once, but for months or even years.
What are the real long-term cognitive consequences?
This pretty much shows the expected outcome. As our dependency on AI for thinking and problem-solving goes up, our own core capabilities, things like independent problem-solving, critical analysis, and even the raw strength of our memory retrieval, they all start to decline. We're outsourcing the very mental work that's supposed to keep these skills sharp.
And look, this isn't just a theory. Research is already starting to show measurable effects. Some studies have found a strong negative correlation, around -0.68, between a higher reliance on AI tools and how well people perform on critical thinking tests. The impact is real and it's quantifiable.
So you see, it's not just one single problem. It's a feedback loop of systemic decay. It starts with dependency formation. The weaker your skills get, the more you need the tool. That leads to cognitive atrophy, as your mental muscles for reasoning and memory just degrade from not being used. And that ultimately creates a huge performance gap where you feel like you're familiar with everything, but you have true competence in nothing.
Which brings us to a final reality check. The issue here isn't AI itself. AI can be an incredibly powerful partner to support learning. It can give feedback, explain concepts in a new way, act as a guide, but it cannot perform the act of learning on behalf of your brain. That cognitive work is and always will be non-transferable.
So the most crucial point of this entire system analysis is this. AI doesn't directly make you less intelligent. What it does is far more subtle. By removing cognitive struggle, effortful retrieval, and error correction, it removes the very conditions that your brain requires to build intelligence in the first place.